One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Okay, so for the OSL, we'll use this marine teal and pale green, and then the higher yellows we'll get from moth green, or you can use dungeon slime or something more of a yellow green, and we're going to increase value in a bit of yellow using Reaper Golden Blonde. Okay, so that's the colors that are going to give us our green OSL. And then for the magenta OSL, the red violet, breast cancer awareness pink, which is a really strong magenta, and then we're going to use golden blonde again to increase the yellow and increase the value, and then of course white at the center of the light. Okay, that's the idea. So I'm not going to try to paint the model the way I usually do, where we lay in colors and we do all those sorts of things, like we paint a blue robe and a brown leg and a gray base or whatever. We're entirely with value, and we're going to use color saturation of the blue and the magenta to create our light effect. And for those of you that are maybe a bit new to this idea, value means the relative dark and light. So we use black to make shadow. We use lighter colors to create the effect of the light on the model, and the highest values to be the center of the light source. So dark to light value, low value is dark, high value is light. And then we're going to also use color saturation to build up the shapes on the model. What does color saturation mean? You think about it as being pigment density, and that means that essentially if I have this red-violet color, and straight from the bottle it has a certain sort of pigment density. If I add black to it to make a shadow, by diluting this magenta with black, this becomes less saturated. The pigment density goes down. It goes from being all magenta to being half magenta, half black. The pigment density is lower, saturation is lower. Similarly, if I add yellow to it to make it lighter, it gets desaturated. Okay, it'll become lighter, but the pigment density will go down because now it's a mix of magenta plus yellow plus white. So it becomes desaturated. So we're going to use color saturation of both of these colors, the teal and the green, and the magenta and the lighter magenta, to build our shapes, and we will highlight them with high values to point towards our light, and we'll create shadows of low value and use the shadows to surround our idea of light on the model. Okay? This is the general plan. Whether it works, who knows? I've never painted this model, so we'll be discovering whether this works. I know it works in theory. I've done this many, many times on different models, but whether it works well on this particular model, we are going to learn together. All right, so for brushes, you will need a fairly large brush, okay? And I'm also going to have two smaller brushes with smaller points on them on hand. Anywhere that I might need to put a tiny detail in or draw a dark line around something, I'll use the smaller brushes for. But 95% of what I'm going to paint today is going to be done with this larger brush, which this is a size 2 Winsor & Newton Series 7. I think I've got the right brush. I'll just double check. Yeah, that's the brush I want. The one with a nice point. Okay, so we're going to need lots of black paint, lots of white paint. So let's start by throwing those into our palette. So top left corner of the palette. Oh, let's zoom that out a little bit. Big old blob of black paint. Top right corner of the palette. Big blob of white paint. And generally speaking, I'm going to try to organize from dark on the left to light on the right, but it may not entirely be achievable. And that's just the key thing, is to try to keep the sets. Oop, that was a lot more paint than I wanted. Try to keep the sets of values roughly aligned. So mid-tones in the middle. I guess I'm getting lots of teal on this model. And there's our magenta. Need a bit more of that. Probably got way too much of that now. But that's life. And we will need some pale green. But maybe not this pale green, because that seems like it's empty. Let's clear that little nozzle. We may be pulling the usual trick of, oh no, there we go. Going over to the shelf and pulling a new one off the shelf. And a little bit of moth green. There we go. Moth green is our yellow for that one. And then we've got lots of breast cancer pink. It is not that important. Somebody was asking, saying they don't have marine teal. It doesn't have to be marine teal. You can use any fairly saturated mid-value blue, okay, and you'll be fine. You can also just skip the blue entirely and use like a mid-value green. Okay, the reason I use the teal is because I can highlight the teal with green, and effectively what I'm doing is adding yellow and lighter paint by adding the green to the teal. And that will increase the value as well as increase the warmth, increase the yellow saturation. And yellow saturation makes something stand out more on the model, which is what we want our light source to do. We want our light source to stand out. But if you don't have that color, you could use you need a color which is not transparent, because we're going to be making a lot of grays with this. So you don't want to use, for example, Reaper's clear blue. You want something that has some fill, like some that's quite opaque. Okay? And then we will also need our golden blonde. Golden blonde is how we're going to create the lighter values of most things here. Okay. Way too much paint on the palette. Not a bad thing for a way to start the day. Now, let's start looking at our model. Now, one of the key ideas that we're just talking about is value. Okay? It's value. So, what we need to do define where is the center of our light source going to be. So the first thing is we're going to use the face of this little creature. It's going to be the center of the blue-green, and the face of this little creature is going to be the center of the magenta light source. And then on the guy in the back, I don't know, maybe we'll make the guy in the back blue-green as well. I haven't really decided that yet. Okay, so let's just start by taking a little bit of, let's just use the yellow. This, what is this color called again? The golden blonde. And what we're going to do is we're going to mark the center of our light source so we know where our light is going to be coming from. So we'll start with, and we know we're going to be using a lot of this color. This is how we're going to increase the value of all of our different paints. So we're going to start just by mapping out where do we want the highest values to be. And the highest values on the model should be the center of the light source. So on the one side we've got this little green monster is going to be eventually. There we go. So there's one little face. And now we need the other little face, which is, there's his little eyes, little brow, outline of his eye sockets. There we go. So I just picked out his teeth, picked out the little face shape, just to make it a little bit more visible for us. And then I'm going to do the same thing, the little face at the back, little eyes, this little brow. Now, I'm not being super precise here, but what I'm not doing is just slapping the paint over everything. I'm picking out the shapes. Okay, because it may be that we want some of these shapes to have shadow behind them later. So I'm just picking out the areas that I know are going to be sort of lighter by the time that we're done. This guy's weird little horn. There we go. There's our little guy. Okay, there he is. Little creepy face. Now, the next thing we want to do, now that we've defined those light sources, we need to define our shadows. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to use a heck of a lot of black paint. Black is going to be our shadow color. And now, on the opposite side of the model, we're going to paint anything which is opposite from the light source is going to get painted black. So don't rush into this. Just kind of bear with me here for a second. So for example, this light and this light shining down on his head means that underneath his hair, by his ear, the bottom of his cheek, under his beard, along his neck, all of that is going to be away from the shadow, so it's going to be away from the direct light, so it's going to have one of the darkest shadows on the model. So we're going to paint that in black. Inside of his mouth, the roof of his mouth, under his nose, these are all areas that are going to be not getting direct shadow. Under the hairline, so are not going to be getting the light directly. So carrying on that idea, let's start on the upper left-hand corner of the model and work our way kind of in an arc around, looking for anything that the light won't hit directly. So this hand, the bottom of this hand is not going to get the light. The bottom of this sleeve is not going to get the light. So let's just paint a strip of dark along that. The light is not going to shine into this, the inside of this sleeve, so let's fill that in black. Now, there's going to be quite a lot of bounce light, meaning light from these two objects are going to hit the base and bounce back up. So we will, at the end, create some colors to put into the shadows. But for now, we're just making everything the light doesn't hit directly as dark as possible. So under this sleeve, under his right sleeve, I guess, it's not going to get the light directly. The top of the sleeve probably will. We'll go back under this part of the sleeve down here. Still working on this right sleeve. Okay, and continue to work my way down along the bottom. We can look at, say, this dagger. And so the hilt of the dagger, put a line under that because the light's going to catch the top but not underneath it. The back of the scabbard, so we draw a black line around the scabbard. This little tabbardy thing at the front here, the light's not going to hit underneath that, so we'll put a dark shadow at the bottom of it and underneath. And everything really below that is going to get painted black. So we look at his left knee. Everything under his left knee is going to get painted black. Now this face is going to be able to shine on this side of the body. So we'll just leave that exposed, but we'll paint a dark line underneath by his foot. Same thing here. So now I'm looking at the book. The light will hit the top of the book, but it's not going to hit the inside at the bottom. Okay, and the bottom of the book. There's a strap around the book, so there's going to be a shadow around that. There's a little fold in the cloth, so let's put that runs from like that belt around the book down along his left knee. So let's put a nice dark line in along the sides of that fold. Okay, and we can lighten that up again later if we need to. Okay, so already, if you look at where the shadows are starting to appear, the light is clearly like catching some parts of the model already. If you started from a black model, that may not be the case, but we will get there momentarily. Okay, now we'll look at his left arm. Underneath his left forearm, his left hand, that's all going to be black. Now I'm looking at his hood. Same idea. So let's look at his head. There's the hairline, gets that shadow underneath it. Underneath his little ponytail, his little man bun thing he's got going on there. And then under the hood. So now I'm looking at this light source. Where is that going to hit? Where is it not going to hit? The light from there is not going to hit under this part of the hood. It's not going to hit the back of this sleeve. Now you can make this as general as you want, or if you're feeling a little bit more confident in this sort of technique, where we're basically lowering the values of all of our shadows, then you can be a little bit more refined about it. Like you can choose which folds you want to put the shadow under, or you can just simply paint the whole zone black, and that's either approach is sort of okay depending on how comfortable you are with this. But for now, oh, he's got a watch. That's, oh no, it's not a watch. It's like a gemstone sort of thing. Okay. I was going to say he's got a little pocket watch on, or a little wrist watch on. It's a bit interesting for a wizard. Maybe more modern than we think. Okay. So now we're going to start to make things a little bit funkier. So the next thing we're going to do now, we're going to have a blue-green light on this side and a magenta light on this side. Those two are going to mix. They're going to interact with each other as we get further down to the model, to the point where by the time we get to the base, there's going to be little patches of green and magenta in different spots. And those lights are going to mix. What happens when you mix teal and magenta? You get essentially a gray that contains both. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this very, oh dear, I might have to get new paint, very runny bit of teal and this magenta, and we're going to mix them together. Okay, and it's going to give us this sort of neutral grayish purple color. And what we're going to do with that color is we're going to use that as the starting color on the base and as the starting color away from our light sources. So we're going to take that color to start with and just dab it onto the base. And you think about it this way, we're going to get mixed light, a mixture of light that's going to hit the base and be bounced back. And this bounced light is sort of like the color of our ambient light. And our ambient light is the light from all the different sources hitting, say, the walls of this space around this guy and bouncing back, or hitting the floor and bouncing up. And that reflected light is what's going to create highlights inside our shadows at a later stage. But for now, we're just going to dab this color onto the base, because you can picture the two light sources mixing midair and creating this sort of dappled mixture of color on the floor. So this purpley gray is the undertone of our OSL. Yeah, that teal that I've got on my palette is really no good. So I'm going to do a little trick here. I'm going to grab a paper towel that's already wet. Okay, so I've got my paper towel, and I'm just going to sit it in that teal. Take it right off the palette. Start again. I think I mostly got medium when I put that on the palette. So get rid of that. Got my teal again. I'm going to shake it up. Shaking it up so hard that my muscles are going to be all agitated. I'm going to be all shaky. I won't be able to paint, which is awesome. Okay, let's try this again. That's a little bit less runny. That's a little bit better. Yeah, that's more like it. Okay. There we go. So the next thing we're going to do with this color, we've already put it on the base. We are going to put it, basically we're going to do a base coat on the model anywhere the light from this whole shape, okay, this whole arc of illusionary color, okay, is hitting the model in a variety of different places. So anywhere, so it doesn't matter if the light's coming from there. If it would hit the model, we add this color in the spot that the light would hit. So we'll look at his left sleeve, right? His hand, his left hand, the upper part of his left sleeve. We put this color over top of those areas. We look, if we work our way around, right, the arc over here hits the top of his left hand in the same way. So we're going to paint this color onto the left hand. We'll paint it on the top of the left sleeve. And we're going to basically pick out every spot in between those 2 points that could at all be affected by the light from this arc. So what does that mean? Let's start by doing the left sleeve. So we did the top of the left sleeve. We're looking at the left sleeve of his robe now. We're going to paint this color on the top of every fold, all the way down to the bottom. Correct. You're basically coloring everything you didn't color in with a shadow. But it's a little bit more than that, because we want to be, yes, you are also leaving the black lines between shapes. We don't just slap the color over everything. We want to maintain the separation of different shapes by not painting over the black that we create. For example, on this hilt of the dagger, there's a dark line in there. We don't want to cover that over. So we're going to paint the shapes without covering over the dark lines. And we are going to make progressively lighter versions of this gray. And we're going to use this gray to pick out all the shapes on the model using progressively lighter gray the closer we get to the light source. And by the time we're up here, right, this will be quite a light color. And then we'll be able to add more blue, more teal and green on the side close to this guy, and add more magenta on the side close to this guy. And because we're starting with a gray that contains both of these colors already, we're going to be basically increasing the saturation of either magenta or teal as we get closer to each of those separate light sources. So it's an idea. And let's see how it works. So I'm working my way along now, and I'm doing his left leg. So this light is going to catch all along the sides of this left leg, but I'm not going to completely cover over those shadows I put in there earlier. Top of his toe, front of his leg. So these little folds might get a little bit of this color on top. Really not much. We want to save that space to put the highlighting of the bounce light into. Alright, we'll do his hair. Now you might be wondering, why am I painting all of this color instead of making a lighter version and working progressively towards the light source? So we're going to, at each layer covers a large percentage of the previous layer. And that's how we build strong, deeply colored shadows. And it's how we're going to build a foundation that gets progressively more saturated in the colors of the light the closer we get to the light. If we were just to make a lighter version of this and paint it straight over a very dark color at the top, you're not going to get as much color saturation as you will, I think, doing it this way. Maybe you could if you use, like, you start with a white model and you just use really, really opaque paint, but that's not the approach we're taking. We're using a layering approach, and it's going to make the light softer. So I'm working on the back of the back of the model, top of the sleeves, adding this purple in. It's really a gray. It's not really a purple. Well, it's a very, very desaturated purple. So here's the technical question. Why is it a desaturated purple when I used a very bright blue, teal, and a very sort of bright magenta? It's desaturated because each of those colors got diluted by 50%, making them very desaturated. So we have this sort of muddy looking purple color as a result, which is what I wanted. Here we go. So just picking out any details that might get directly hit by this light. Working my way around the back. That light's going to come across there. A little bit on there. Oh, sorry, I was drifting off. And maybe a little bit at the back here. Now, I'm also going to paint this color over the bottom parts of the spell effect. If you picture this as being like a spell effect, like a hand, I'm going to paint it over that part. And this bit over his left hand, which is like a little swirly bit, I'm going to paint it over that as well. And And that means that when I start to increase the saturation of magenta, say, on this side, I'll be able to create like a zone, a swirl of light in the center of this that comes up and becomes the creature. That's the idea anyway. Alright, so now what do we do? Well, let's make another mix. And we're going to take the teal and the magenta, add them together again. We get our nice purple, almost exactly the same color. And now I'm going to add just a little bit of golden blonde to it. So somebody just asked about the face. I really just picked out the nose, the brow, the cheeks, the beard with that color. They didn't do much effort on the specific details of the face. Okay, we're going to add a little bit of this yellow, the golden blonde now, to our mixture. So we're making a lighter gray. And we're going to do the same thing again, picking out the shapes with this lighter gray. Okay, so let's take a look at our base first. So for example, on the base we've got these various stones and cracks and things at the front. So I'm going to pick out some of those shapes with a little bit of this, do the edges of them, pick out the little flagstones. This is one of Aaron's magnetized bases. Cracks and edges and that sort of thing, just kind of pick out the shapes. And if you've still got the broccoli base or whatever on this guy, that's fine. Just sort of add this color in a halo around his feet on the base. Don't want to paint the whole base solidly this color, just kind of pick the shapes out. I feel like I've used this base recently before. I might have run out of varieties and be reusing some of these bases. Okay, now I'm going to use this color to pick out all the details on the model that point towards the light source again. So let's say we look at the hand. I can pick out the fingers, the palm of the hand, and I'm working on the side that faces the light. He's got this little bracer, so I'll pick out the three separate sections of the bracer, the upper part of his sleeve, the upper part of these folds, and then further down on that sleeve. Okay, there's an area in there where the light will catch. So this color is on the base, so this color can be in those in areas further from the light. Okay, so this color can be found almost all the way to his feet. So I'm going to pick out this little pouch. I'll pick out the edge of his belt. Basically, I'm putting a highlight of this color, a large highlight of this color, on every shape on the model that is not fully black. And I'm covering 95% or more of the last color. What that's going to do for us is we are going to start to be able to pick out and see the shapes individually, see the details, okay? And it's giving us that foundation we need to be able to add color in a couple more steps. We'll start adding, we will stop adding just a neutral gray. Okay, or you can think of this as a bit like a mother color gray. And we will start adding, we're going to basically create two lines on our palette. a line which goes towards the blue and a line that goes towards the magenta, of increasing values in each case. And then the magenta one will paint on the side of the model facing the magenta light source, and the blue or green one will paint on the side of the model facing the green face. Green face, magenta face. But for now, the light is mixed. So we're going to use the mixed grays. To pick out all of the details. Yeah, I like it. Pick out his hair. I'm not being super careful about the hair, but I will be a little bit more careful on the face now. The face is going to get a lot of color. Once we start to get to the higher value paints with a lot of color saturation in them. And we want to make sure we keep the shadows visible on the face. So don't, we just start to pick out like the nose, the cheek, the eyes, his brows separately, so that we can build them up as separate shapes and leave the shadows in between them. Let's keep going. Do his hood. So just systematically working my way around the model, looking at the light source, and then seeing where the light would hit, and working my way around the model. Make it a little bit more if I start to run out. And this is where a larger brush with a fine point on it is really to your advantage. We can use the fine point to pick out the details, but the brush is large enough that it contains enough paint that we can keep working for quite a while without having to reload the brush, which means we can be quite efficient and we can go quite quickly through each of these stages of these colors. And the back of this sleeve is quite close to the light source. I'm just going to get quite a lot of this highlight. So one way to think about what we're doing here is we're effectively value sketching the model using a gray that's composed of the light sources coming from the magical effect. And to answer your question, yes, you can do a little bit of this color on the light source coming out of his hand. But what you want to do, we don't want to paint it on the outsides. We want to paint it in the center. Sounds a bit counterintuitive, but we're going to basically create a line of higher value that goes up through the center of these shapes that will eventually become our light source. So like on the face on this side, I can add this color as a line kind of in the shadows down through the center of the light source. Like that. There we go. And that's going to look like the light is in the center of this misty, sort of smoky shape coming up out of his hand. Need to do that on both sides. Think about it like the way you highlight a flame. Okay, when you highlight most flames, like a natural fire source, like a bonfire or something, the lightest colors are in the center of that shape. The center and close to the bottom of that shape. So we're creating a zone which is lighter through the middle of the magic effect. Okay, now we've got our big blob of purple and red here. We need to make quite a bit more. And more yellow into it. So this is the gray that I was just working with a moment ago. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to split it into two piles. Part is going to go up there, and that's my blue line, and part is going to go down here, and this is my magenta line. And now what I want to do, because both these lines need to get lightened, is I'm going to take my yellow and I'm going to add some to each side. So we're lighting both sides. But on the blue side, in addition to lighting it with the yellow, I'm going to add more blue to it. So now we have our blue-gray, more yellow, and then we have our magenta-gray. And these two should be around the same value. Okay. So we have a blue-gray and a magenta-gray. I'm going to start with the magenta-gray. Let's remember which of these two guys is magenta. It's this guy. So I'm going to start working on this side, and I'm going to add this magenta-gray in the center of that light source, working my way down along like that this is a light which is going up through the center of this shape. Now, I don't want this to go right onto the faces, because I want that face to be just magenta, okay? But I will bring the color down in the periphery of this shape, down right to his hand. And we're actually going to go down further than that. Put a little of this in the center, on the back side as well. And now we are going to highlight the elements. I just added violet red to make the lighter magenta gray. Just the violet red. Okay, and now so we know that this is going to be the magenta side. So the parts of him that are only going to get hit by magenta now, for example, his face. So we'll do his eyelid, his eye, his cheek, the upper part of his beard, the side of his beard facing the magenta, facing this fist. But so as you look at him, it's the right-hand side of the model. I'm going to start to highlight all those shapes carefully with this light gray color. Now remember, this color still contains teal. So this is still a shadow color. So the highlight we're making with this, really, by the time we're done, all that's going to be left of this on the model is a thin line of this on the periphery close to the edge of the shadows. So we were going to cover about 90%. Yep, you're on the right track. Now, so if you only have clear magenta, you can add something like stone gray to it at this stage, okay, and that'll make it more opaque. The whatever blue you're adding should make it more opaque as well, but you're going to run into a problem when you transition from the magenta gray into just magenta and into the breast cancer awareness pink, because if we need to make adjustments to the position of the magenta, the clear magenta is not going to have probably the impact in terms of value that we're going to look for, but you can try adding a gray to it to make it a bit more opaque if you need to. All right, but for now, let's keep working. So on the magenta side, this color is going to go down, as far as the tip of his boot. So let's do the tip of his boot, outline that little sole bit of the boot, top of that fold. It's going to hit the edge of that fold along his left knee. And everything kind of to the right of the book as we look at the model is only getting hit with magenta. And this is still a shadow color, don't forget, okay? So this is going to go quite far down the model. And we just pick out those little shapes, okay? His robe, the inside of that sleeve, like that. Keep making our way down along the model. And this color is going to be visible on the rocks on the base, on basically in a quadrant that sort of goes from around there to around here is going to be distinctly magenta in the shadow, not just the teal. Or not so more magenta, less mix. So we can pick out those shapes on the base with this color as well. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side with the teal. Now, have I forgotten part of the model? I might have. Let me just take a quick look. Yeah, so I got to do the back of the sleeve on the back of the model. Turn around, look at this side. So we've got this hand, so it'd be his left hand. And the hand on the left as we look at the model meets this color as a highlight. But it's going to be more blue-green on the back. So I'm going to do less magenta. Like, I might just bring the magenta up to the edge of the hood there, but not any further up than that, because this is mostly going to be blue-green on this side from this face. But this magenta is going to shine down. It's going to get all of this stuff. There we go. And now I'm going to clean our brush out, and we'll do the same thing on the other side of his body with this teal-based gray. You can paint it lighter color first, then highlight on top with the darker colors. It's just a question of how comfortable you are with. Like, so I feel pretty comfortable with painting the insides of shapes. But you could always, and one of the things about this approach is going to be that we're going to be able to adjust everything at the end. So if you make a mistake and you put a light spot somewhere that it shouldn't be, you'll be able to go back and darken it up again, and vice versa. So painting this down through the center. And this side, okay, we can have the green and the teal on this side. So this is going to affect the hair on this side of his face, or this side of his head, more than the magenta will. So we're going to illuminate it with this color. We might get a little bit of that color in his cheek and on his beard on that side. We're definitely going to get it on his little ponytail. And then same as we did on the other side, we want to keep the last color as the shadow of this color. So don't completely cover the previous color. This color is going to dominate over magenta now on this side of the model. So let's look at this leg as an example. Okay, this side of the leg is magenta. We want this side of the leg to be teal gray. So we're going to highlight it that way. And we don't need to go any further down than this. This is going to get bounce light on it. Just focus on areas above really above the fringe of that scarf. Or whatever this thing is, little tabbardy guy. You can pick things out in as much detail as you like, or as little, but try to preserve that sort of the shadows that you deliberately built. Try not to fill them in with this color. And again, this is where a good sharp brush with paint that's not drying too quickly really is your friend for being able to quickly lay in these colors, while picking out all the details at the same time. There we go. Do the top of that sleeve. Just keep in mind, again, this is still a shadow color. And those of you who've taken classes on OSL from me before will know that one of my favorite sayings is that the shadow points towards the light. So building the shadows first is going to give us the best possible look in our light source, in my opinion anyway. And certainly on this approach to doing the OSL, it's going to be having good shadows is going to be an important part of it. And we are still working on shadow. I'll keep doing that. I'll work along that sleeve at the top, the inside of the palm of his hand. And we do the same thing. So I didn't do the rocks yet. I'll do the base now. We did this magenta on the front on this side. And we'll do this teal on the opposite side. So we're looking at something of similar value. It's just more, it's shifted towards blue by the additional amount of teal we added into it. But we can let the two overlap with each other a little bit. That's not going to harm anything. And bear in mind, it's because our light sources are kind of intermixed with each other. So we'll just keep doing that. Just keep picking out the shapes a little bit here and there. Make the color apparent on the base. Doesn't have to be super perfect. And that teal is going to come down and hit here. It's going to come down and hit out here. Just pick out the edges of the shape so that. And I'm making it very ragged to suggest like the texture of the stone. I should have mentioned that's what I was doing. I'm deliberately not making smooth brush strokes so that I end up with something that looks very irregular. And then at a later stage I can do some edge highlighting to find the shapes a little bit more tightly, and then that will give us more definition of the shapes in the OSL. Okay, so you see where we're coming from with our shadows, and you can see how bright we're headed with our spell effect. Okay, now I've left out the back of the model, so I'm going to keep going on that, and I'll just do a quick check-in, find out how everybody's doing. Is everybody getting frustrated, or are we still keeping up? Just remember you have to type or I won't know. See, some questions are coming. Not keeping up, but not frustrated. Okay, good. That's one of the reasons we record these things, so that you can go and follow along and try it again at your own speed, and you can pause it when you need to and all that kind of good stuff. But glad to have you here, and it's also helpful if you're starting over. Okay, if you're more following along than painting along, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. The other people that are painting along will thank you because it slows me down, and but it also often makes the classes more, or the paint along we really should call it, more useful. Because you're going to hear more of the theory behind the decisions I'm making as I go. And that's sort of what it's all about. For example, I'm painting the inside of his hood now with this color. And I'm adding these highlights on the back with this to define these shapes more. One of the skills that will come fairly quickly with this, I'm not sure if we've talked about this in these paint-alongs before, but dark lining is a really important skill. And then when you dark line, that means basically painting a dark line around every shape. Anywhere two surfaces meet, you paint a dark line. And it's meant to be like the shadow lines that you see when your fingers are close together. Okay, you would manually paint that in as a dark line. And the more dark lining you do, the more precise you're going to get with your brush strokes. But you're also going to get better at reading the shape of the model. And at a certain point, as you're painting your base coats, as you're doing your shadow layers and all that sort of thing, you'll stop covering over the areas that should have a dark line. So effectively, you'll start dark lining by having your model painted black or some dark color when you start, and then just leave the dark lining in place without covering it over from the beginning of your paint job. And that is actually far more precise than trying to come back and paint in dark lines afterwards. It works better. It looks sharper. So it's like a gateway sort of skill. Okay, I think we need to bring some of this color up into the periphery on the back here so that this blue-green guy will make more sense when we go and start highlighting him with blue-green. So basically what I'm doing is adding this blue-green color on the back of these two faces to be like a halo surrounding this guy. It's getting a bit runny. I think this teal is the issue. The teal is very runny for some reason. This is life. Okay, now we're going to... That's looking good, Belle the Cat. You are on the right track. I can clearly see all the shapes on your model. You're going in the right direction, and that's what we want. So now what we're going to do, we're going to take... We're going to do one more gray layer. But this gray layer is going to be built by using just a little bit of this layer, the layer we just did, adding lots of our saturated color into it. So I'm adding quite a bit of magenta. I'm going to add more yellow to lighten it. And I want it to be lighter than the previous layer. And I'm going to add just a touch of the breast cancer pink in. Start shifting it in that direction. So this color is now very saturated in magenta. It's lighter than the previous layer. Okay, and but it's still effectively a shadow layer. And now where this is just a very magenta rich color, we're going to keep this focused on the magenta side of the model. So we'll start by adding this into the center where we want our light source to be. So I'm working on the spell effect to start with. So we're not adding any teal in this mix. We're going to make a separate mix of teal in a moment. So we're going to put this down through the center of the previous color. Now mine may not be light enough. Doesn't feel light enough to me. So I'm going to add more breast cancer pink and more yellow. Need it to be a little bit lighter than the previous mix. Now, ultimately, how would we check? We would make a black and white photo of it and take a look to see whether or not it was lighter. But for today, I'm just going to eyeball it. Okay, now it's lighter. This is what I was looking for. And I'm going to put this lighter mix down through the middle of our spell effect, only on the magenta side. And then we're going to start to highlight our everything on the magenta side again. But now, this color, we don't necessarily want it to go all the way down. Let me think about this now for a moment. So his boot might be shiny, so you might get a little bit of this as a highlight on the toe of his boot. A much smaller highlight of this in a few little spots on his cloak. I think we can put some of this as edge highlights on the rocks, but really just focused on the magenta side of the base. So this is going to be our edge highlight on the magenta side of the base. There we go. And now I'm going to start working my way up. So on the sleeve in here, this left sleeve, I want this color to be a highlight on the outward curved part of the inside of the sleeve. And we're still working with a fairly dark color. So this highlight is going to be pretty large. Okay? And then on his leg, we will do a little bit on these folds, but not all the way to the bottom. Maybe to just below his knee. Because the light intensity of these things is going to drop off very, very quickly as you go down the model. There we go. That's about the limit of where I want to put it. And now I'm going to highlight individual shapes on this side of the model that face towards the light source. What I don't want to do is have this pink really inside any of the exclusively teal shapes on the other side. If you do, it could look cool, right? Like I could put a little bit on the inside edge of that stripe, and that's not going to harm anything. Because bear in mind, we're still working really with a shadow color, so we're not at risk of making big mistakes, but predominantly we want this color to highlight shapes that are facing directly towards our light source, which is going to be that that face. I'll try to focus it that way. If you wanted to, you could also say, have this bit of light here. You could say that some of that was shining across and was inside the shadow side of this sleeve. Just a little bit. Like that. Let's keep working our way around the model. And we're going to do the same thing on the back side. So let's put this pink magenta inside the spell effect. Bit of an odd angle, but you need to sort of reach in there in front of his face, inside that little space inside the spell effect. I'll just reiterate, this is still a shadow color, so it's going to cover most of the previous magenta layer. Wait till we start highlighting. You're going to be like, no, the light, it's blinding. Just found an awesome mold line going all the way down this guy's face that I missed. There we go. So now we want to do the same thing with the teal on the other side. Now, there's different approaches, right? We could just work our way up through the magentas exclusively until we're done, and then work our way all the way up to the teals. That's totally valid. The way I'm doing it here is meant to keep everything sort of in balance. So the relative values, color saturation, all that sort of stuff is pretty well controlled. So I've cleaned out my brush. Now I'm working on the teal side. I did the pink, yeah. And I'm adding more teal into my gray mix, but I need to lighten it, so I'm adding quite a bit of yellow. Golden blonde yellow. So that's going to desaturate a bit. It's going to make it paler. It's going to make it lighter. And I'm going to add a touch of green in there as well. Now when I add green, I also get yellow. So this is going to lighten this up a bit. And I need to... My paper towel has become a swampy, wet mess, so I just need to put a new paper towel out on top of that. Put some water on it to keep it down. There we go. All right. And I think this is going to have the same problem where it wasn't quite light enough. Add a little bit more yellow to that, a bit more green. And it'll give us a slightly higher value. More yellow. There we go. This is what I want. And now we'll do the same thing. This, bearing in mind, again, this is still a shadow color. So I'm going to put this color as edge highlights on anywhere that I have teal on the base. Bring out the shapes on the base a little bit. Edges of cracks, little broken pieces of stone, dips and dribs and dabs of invented shapes that might catch the light. Working my way around the base. There we go. So now we've kind of got that halo of green light on one side and pink light on the other. And they kind of go into each other a little bit. And now you'll remember that we put a little bit of this color on the the equivalent pink on his toe. We don't have an equivalent shape on the other side. We came down just below his knee and on this shape with the equivalent value in the, sorry, I said pink, I meant magenta. So now we're going to take this color and we're going to highlight shapes at about the same height on the model with this color. And I think my mix has ended up being slightly lighter than the pink side, so I'm going to work a little bit further up the model, try to keep things a little bit better in balance. Yeah, about down about as far as the middle of that dagger scabbard. Just pick out the shapes. And I don't want to completely cover over the previous shadow layer, but this, again, this is still another layer of shadow. Even though it looks much lighter than the previous layer we put on, it's still a shadow layer. So we want to cover most of the previous layer down to that height that I just mentioned, picking out the shapes. Now this sleeve, sorry I keep drifting, inside this sleeve, this light isn't going to come down too far, but it's basically going to be like a line of light across the inside of the sleeve, like that. We should have a nice separation between this color and the magenta, which is right there. And then we jump over the magenta and we carry on with the top part of the sleeve. Again, picking out little details and shapes that would catch this teal colored light directly. Do that on his hair. Beard. Working my way up to the palm of his hand now. And we are going to bring this color up through the center of the spell effect, and then we're going to paint it in the periphery of the spell effect around the face. Hope that makes sense. So here we go. Yeah, that's correct. There's a pink hand and a teal hand. It's a very, very complicated sculpt. I really like it. This is a Julie Guthrie sculpt, and I really dig it. There was a Ral Partha sculpt back in the day that featured almost an identical wizard. And, yeah, you're on the right track, Heather. Looking good. Looking really good. Yep, looking really good. I'm recording, yep. So then we're going to bring this color up into the periphery of our little green face guy now. Like that. Yeah. Looking good. So what I meant by into the periphery of, so this face is going to be a bright green face with teal around it. Okay, so this shadow color, I'm bringing it up to the perimeter around the outer extremities of that face, and that is so that when we start to bring up the lighter colors in the center, this is going to be the frame of shadow around the face. Hopefully it'll make more sense in a few moments when we get there. Now we're going to do the same thing as we just did on the back of the model, and I have just about run out of paint, which is not a good thing. To try to get that mix again could be a little bit of a challenge. We're going to try it. No, I've already messed it up. A little bit more blue. This is why I always try to mix lots of paint. Okay, there we go. Now, we'll do the same. So even if my mix is not quite exactly right, and it's a little bit too green, when we do it on the back of the model, it'll be less visible if I've made a mistake. So let's start in the center of the spell effect. I'll bring that down into his hand. We're going to bring that in the periphery of the face on this side of the model as well. And this is why I decided to make this guy green instead of magenta, because now we've got green over here and green on the back of this green face as well. So if we brought magenta through, it could have looked a bit quite strange, really. So just wanted to avoid that particular problem. So just a little bit of a shadow of green around the face on this side as well. That was probably too much, but whatever. Gotta make mistakes to make things a bit more organic anyway. There we go. So that's the outside of the face on this side, and we do the same thing as on the other side. We're going to highlight the various shapes that we can see, pick them out. And again, this is still a shadow color. You're going to cover quite a lot of the previous color. But now on this side, this face is less bright. So I don't think we'll go down quite as far on the model with this green teal mix. Do the sleeve. So we went down to this point, right? So I think with the one on the back, which is a smaller face, we'll keep it at about that level. So keep it to about this level on the back. So when I say that, I almost always I say we'll keep it to that level, but then I see one or two little shapes that still need to be picked out a little bit more than their surroundings. And I'll hit those as well, even though I didn't plan it that way. But then from here up, I'm going to cover most of that previous shadow layer. And soon we're going to be starting to do highlight colors. Won't that be exciting? It's the best bit of this kind of paint job, is seeing your highlight magic illumination suddenly go pow and explode off the model. There we go. I'm digging it. Okay, and there's the colors on the base, and there he is. Now what we're going to do is start to very quickly build up the values around our light. So we're going to do the blue first. We're going to grab pale green, chuck it into that mix, and the pale green on its own should be lighter than the previous mix. So we'll chuck that in there. We might need, we're going to need a little bit more of the golden blonde. We'll chuck that in there. Do we really? Maybe we don't. No, let's just put more green back in. We can add a touch of moth green in there too if we want. All right. So this mix is lighter than the previous mix. This is really our first sort of light colored highlight. So we're going to start with this by where we did the yellow face initially, and we painted that shadow color around it. This color, essentially, I'm going to connect the previous shadow into the edge of the yellow. So there's my yellow, this is my green, and I'm pulling the green back away from the yellow towards the edge of the shadow, and then from the shadow back forward towards the edge of the yellow. And we're just connect the two across that previously dark colored bridge. There was like a barrier of a dark color. And you're going to see this start to light up really quick here. Now that we're starting to use these greens with a lot of yellow in them. And I want to do that all the way around the periphery of the yellow, this yellow core here of this first shadow monster. Now, don't paint down through this shape into his hand yet, because we're going to handle that differently. Okay, but for now, just focus on connecting the face and that shadow color we put around it earlier. There we go. There we go. And we're going to do this on the back as... Oh, there's a spot in his mouth where we need to do that too. Let's do that now. Let's pick out those shapes inside his mouth with this color too. Teeth on the upper mouth. There we go. And we do this on the back as well. So just back and forth between my yellow and the shadow color, connecting them together. Yep. Nope, that's good. That's good. If you find that it's too green, at the end, you're going to be able to go back in and glaze with the teal to make things blue again, or whatever color you used for your blue. So you're probably wondering, why did he make that shadow on the periphery? Because if the tendency would be to try to make this light color go right out to the edges. And what you lose, you need a dark frame around any light source. Otherwise, it doesn't look like a light source. And with a very elevated, and this is quite often what looks wrong with torches, right? People do a very bright light to the tip of a wand or the tip of a torch, and it doesn't look lit because it doesn't have a frame around it. That's why when you paint lightsabers, you don't paint the light all the way to the end of the lightsaber. You paint a light in the center, and you keep the saturated colors out to the periphery, and then it looks like that light shining outwards, okay? But without that darker spot towards the edge, it doesn't tend to look like a light. So that's why we've got this darker frame around our light. Now, the next step we got to do is we're going to take this same green, and we're going to go down through the center of our spell effect. Okay, so we're just putting a tight line of this color in the center, down through the middle. And this is a similar idea, that the shadows on the outside make this light look brighter. And we put that down in the middle of here. And then we're going to do it down below in there. Exactly the same as if I was trying to pull a flame into the center, or make the center of a fire look brighter. Okay, so we get that light in there. And we'll do the same thing in the palm of his hand a little bit. Fingertips. A little bit on that cuff of that bracer. Now we're going to do this. Actually, just work our way down through this side of the model. So now we're going to start highlighting all the shapes that are going to catch that light directly. And these highlights do need to start being quite a bit smaller, so that we want to be sure to keep the shadow layer that we previously put in. And now the size of these highlights will determine whether or not things appear to be shiny or dull. So smaller highlights make things look shinier. Large muted highlights make things look dull. So for example, his hair, we can put a bit of a ring of light around the crown of his head, and that's going to look like a slightly reflective halo, like his hair was shiny. We can do something similar on his, say on the coat, what is this, the collar of his jacket. We put a tight little highlight, and that's going to make the trim look a little bit reflective. So you can choose whether to make things appear shiny or matte now by how big you make this highlight. So smaller is going to look shinier. Going to work my way across the top of this cloak or robe, and the light is there and it's coming straight down into this space. So what we don't want to do is make like a series of lines of ridges of highlight along that sleeve. We want to connect those highlights right across the top of the sleeve because they're all receiving the light directly. But then we can separate them out again as we get a little bit further down away from the light source. Definitely do not connect this color right into the pink. You definitely need to keep those two separate. A little bit different in this zone where the two lights are going to be basically merging one right into the other. But down here we need to keep the lights separate, and that's called a terminator line between the two light sources. This bracer gets its little highlight. That bracer's a good one to make it look like it's shiny. Down here, we don't really need to add much down in there. We can put a little hint of this green. It really shouldn't have much down there. Now the shinier objects, they're going to reflect the green from further away. So for example, this belt buckle, little bright highlights on it because it's shiny. Anywhere that there's an outward curve or little convex shape is going to reflect the light a little bit more strongly. So those spots, you can give them a slightly more intense highlight, like more saturated highlight, even though they're further away from the light source, because they're shiny, they're more mirror-like. Corner of that hilt's another example. Little ring there on the hilt, or the, what's this called, scabbard. And this corner of the book probably gets a little bit of green. Not much. Starting to look pretty illuminated. We need to do the same thing for him on the back. So send over spell effect. Start highlighting the top of his head. My poor little paintbrush is starting to get really tired. I was painting for hours this morning, working on a Warhammer model. And now the brush is like, leave me alone, let me sleep. So there's my little halo effect around the top of his head. Collar inside the hood. You can do a little halo effect on the hair on this little bun as well. You could also make it, treat it like an overall round shape if you wanted to, but I'm not gonna. Top of that sleeve is hard to get into in there. In there. So that little ring on his little sash thing might catch this color. There's not a huge amount of stuff that's really reflective on that side. And now we're going to go down and do the same thing with the breast cancer awareness pink. Now, I have run out of space, so I'm going to continue doing this on the other side. I'm going to add my yellow in there. Should be enough. So this is lighter than that one over there. Okay, so I've just continued on this other side over here. All right, now same thing as we just did. We connect that shadow color around the periphery up to the yellow in the face. You're probably wondering, why isn't he adding white to get stronger values? And I'm saving the white for when I really need it to really pump up the final values in the center of the light sources. Okay, we're going to get to that. We're actually getting to the part of this which it suddenly all accelerates and goes very, very quickly. All right. Because, of course, as each layer gets smaller, the highlights get smaller, the speed with which you can do it gets quicker. So, painting the center of my spell effect on the front of the model. Connecting that shadow area to the face. few little impy guys or little phantasmal creatures holding hands there across the gap. And we do the same thing on the back. We do light in the center of the spell effect. Sorry, I keep drifting off. And now we start highlighting the shapes which are going to get that light directly. So the front of the hair, pick out the shapes on the face. Same thing as I was saying earlier about bringing the highlights up closer towards the light. So now we're really aiming our highlights towards this part of the model. A few little spots I want to pick out on the book. And we do that on the back as well. Just saw your comment there, Bell the Cat. Yeah, I think Aaron's a little surprised by what is coming out of his spell. Okay, now let's keep going on the green. So now what we're going to do is we are going to grab just straight pale green. Okay, and we're going to add the yellow into it to lighten it, and a touch of moth green or whatever, lime green. If you don't have any lime green, just add like sun yellow or something to it. And this is going to really bump up the values of the center of our light source. So we're going to use this sparingly initially. And the areas that were previously just yellow, like that golden blonde color, are going to get this color to really, we want to bring up the values, which is why we've chosen a lighter color and we've added the golden blonde to it. We want to increase the warmth, which is why we've added the lime green and the golden blonde. And it's still a very, very saturated yellow-green. Could be more saturated, but it's still pretty saturated. And this is going to be sort of the yellow-green around the main light source. So we're picking out the light source itself. So the teeth, the lips, all those shapes are getting this color. And you really, this should be tight in around the face, okay? Not everywhere, really focused in around the face. And now we're going to put a little bit of this in the center of the spell effect. So like the part where it comes out of his hand, just a fine line of this down through the center into the palm of his hand. Down onto the bracer, and we'll stop, we'll go as far as that for now, okay, and then we'll do the other side of the model the same way. And this is just to pick out the face of the little phantasm guy here. Essentially everything that was yellow in that first step is getting covered over with this. Go. And we're going to put that into the spell effect by his hand as well. And then just do the tips of his fingers a little bit with that. His thumb. A little bit on the bracer there, but not much. Pretty happy with that. And now, that same color, we're going to do very, very small highlights just in the areas closest to the light source. So this is like the highest highlights for now outside of the light source itself. I don't see anything on the back. The back of his head needs this highlight in that halo on his hair. So that would be just about the only spot. Oh, can't forget the man bun. There we go. Maybe a little on the hood and collar, but not much. Trust your instincts. If you think there should be a highlight there, give it a little bit of extra light. And now, you know what's coming now. Do the same thing with the pink. Now, the difference with the pink being that essentially we can really only desaturate it at this point. And so I think we'll add just a little bit of white into that as well. We could add some like brighter yellow. Yeah, let's do that. Let's add some brighter yellow. How about Reaper Clear Yellow or Sun Yellow, something like that. This is really going to throw the magenta into a different spectrum, right? But just a tiny bit of that yellow. That's what we want. It's going to make it a little bit more orangey. But that combined with... So we've added a little bit of white, a little bit of sun yellow to lighten it. Or a little bit of golden blonde and a little bit of white to lighten it. Added a tiny bit of clear yellow to warm it up. And what I just did with the lime green is what the yellow's doing for us with the magenta. And now this focuses on the face of the little phantasm. His little teeth, his cheeks, his lips. You want these highlights to be quite small and just sort of pick out those shapes lightly. Yeah, it turns a little bit orange when you add the yellow, just a little bit. But as long as you don't put too much in there, it won't go really, really orange. Like if you think about adding yellow and magenta, like you think about it as primary colors, you're going to get orange if you add those two directly together. So it should look more like a little bit of a peachy color rather than an orange. If it doesn't look like a peachy color, you added way too much yellow. In fact, quite often when I do this, I'll use a skin tone as opposed to a yellow, because it has this similar effect to adding just a tiny bit of yellow, but it's a little bit more controllable. But while we're doing OSL, we do want a little bit of intensity. And this definitely gets it for us. There we go. And we use that same color now in the same ways we just used the green previously. And we'll do just little picked out highlights on the face where the light's going to reflect most strongly. So top of the cheek, top of the nose, top of his mustache, his lip, the little gemstone. But be careful not to. You don't need these to go very far down the model, unless an object is particularly reflective, like that bracer, for example. This color does not need to go very far down. And when we do the back, it's the same idea. Keep the highlights quite small. Objects that might be a little bit shinier. I like it. It's starting to look pretty cool. Okay, so a couple of things to do at this stage just to get an idea if you're on the right track. Look at the model in the shadow away from your desk lamp. So like I put mine under the desk and take a look. And if I can still see all the shapes pretty clearly defined, and it's definitely, brightly lit at the top, darker at the bottom, I know I'm on the right track. Look at the front and back, and that's all good. And now what I'm going to do, now it's time to start adding the pure white into the mix. So I am going to grab some of the pure white, and I'm going to add it to my green mix. Now make sure your brush is really clean. If you accidentally put green in your pink or put pink in your green, you're going to neutralize them into a gray. And if you do that at this stage in your palette, you need fresh paint. So just be a little bit cautious about that. So I'm going to add the white to the green mix, and then I'm going to add a big dollop of lime green. What is this green? Moth green. Moth green. I think somebody was going to use Dungeon Slime, and Dungeon Slime is a great color for this. Yeah, looking good, Belle the cat. I like it. Looking good. And now I'm going to go back with this much lighter, much brighter mix, and I'm going to be picking out shapes carefully on my little phantasm here. So I'm picking out his eyelids, center of his eyes, the edge of his little eye sockets. Okay, picking them out carefully. Small highlights at a time. It's better to make a small highlight close to the center and extend it outwards if it needs to be bigger, than to make a big highlight too far away from the light source and then discover it was too light and have to darken it again. So little highlights. But because of all the layers that we put underneath, these highlights are going to look actually pretty smooth, because as they dry, they're getting closer and closer in color to the previous layer, which already contains the same colors. So if you feel like you put too much on and it's too light, just wait a moment, wait till it dries, see what it looks like, and you might discover that it's not as light as you thought it was, and it looks just fine. So just go a little bit slowly and carefully at the moment, and pick out the parts of the face that really are the spot the light's going to come from. There we go. And then we're going to work our way down through the center of the spell effect again. A few little dots in his palm. This is the palm of the monster. And then a little line in the center of the swirl. Tips of the fingers, a little bit on the palm of his hand. And that super fabulous bracer. It's getting there. And you know what's next? The little halo highlight on his hair. Needs to be quite small, just a few dots. Really just a few tiny little dots. There we go, that's far enough. Same thing on the back. Just a few dots on the hair. And highlight the face again. Pick out the light source, the eyes, the eyelids, the nose, the teeth. Oh, this was a 25th anniversary miniature, right? That's where I've seen it before. Just clued in to that's what this miniature was. And a little bit of the light in the center of the spell effect down towards his hand. Maybe just a bit of that light peeking out from between his fingers. There we go. Okay. And now same thing with the pink mix. More white, more yellow. Oh, that was too much yellow. More white. There we go. Nice clean brush. And same deal. Pick out the teeth. Eyes. The brow. These little horns. And then a little bit in the center of the spell effect. Working our way down. And that shiny bracer gets this nice little bright highlight. And a little bit on his face, I think. Just the edge of the hair, the brow, tip of the nose, top of the cheeks. Pick out his face, maybe tip of his tongue a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Top of that gemstone. Belt buckle. The super shiny stuff gets an extra little bit. Extra bling. Wow, I'm digging it. Now, is that enough contrast? It's a trick question for you. Is that enough contrast? Never. Thank you, Belle the Cat. Correct answer. So what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this? Oh, I forgot to do the back. Sorry. We've got to do the back through the center of the spell effect first. Just a little bit. There we go. Now, so the answer was never. Never enough contrast. So what do? Pure white. We grab pure white. And we are going to put little careful daubs of pure white in a few certain spots to really to bling it up. So we're going to do the center of the eyes. And if you picture the eyes as being the light source, then that would mean the eyelid, under the brow a little bit, and his cheek just below the eye is going to get more light. We'll do the same thing on all of the eyes. Okay, and let's do the tips of each of these little teeth. There we go. And we'll do that with the, because we're just using straight white, we can do that on the pink and on the green at the same time. Now, if you do this and the white is barely visible, that's good. It means you built your values up almost to pure white already. And in this case, if you're looking at it and the contrast doesn't look like it's enough, now you have the option of adding shadow to make the to increase the contrast. If you do this and the white stands out like a sore thumb, then your intermediate layers may not have been light enough. Oops, I grabbed the wrong color. We want pure white. So I do that pure white on the face, on the back. Center of the eye, eyelid, under the brow. It may also be that your white that you're adding is a little too thin. And if that's the case, what we're going to do, it's what's called insisting on the color. So we've got our pure white around the light source. And if it doesn't really show up the way we want it to, okay, that's barely visible. We can add the white again. What I like to do in this particular circumstance is I'm going to basically put a layer of moth green, not mixed with anything, just straight moth green. I'm going to work it into the brush, make it really thin, and I'm going to work the moth green in around the light. And that's going to increase the yellow saturation in the green light without really lowering the value of the white that I just put on there. It's not going to lower the value of it by very much, but it's going to really increase the yellow saturation in the green. And now I'll go back and do the white over again in those spots. I'll do the same thing on the front because just keep it all consistent. So moth green, great color for this. Dungeon slime is a little bit chalkier, but it still works. Livery green from Vallejo's, one of the better colors for this. A fluorescent yellow green would work really well. If you were going to use fluorescent colors to do your lighting, this is where you would start to use them. On the pink side, I'm just going to increase the yellow again. I could also use a fluorescent pink if I wanted to. I wonder if I have a fluorescent pink. Maybe. Ooh, amaryllis pink. That's not a fluorescent. Fluorescent red. Fluorescent pink. I haven't used this color in a long time. I don't know if it's going to work. So clearly we don't need fluorescence for the OSL to work, right? We've got the look, but we'll give this a try just for fun. This is a fluorescent. It's called acid pink. I'm not usually a fan of these colors. They're a little on the gooey side. They don't tint particularly well, but my God, they are saturated pink. All right. So now what I would do with that pink is make a glaze of it. So thin it quite a bit. Okay, and then where we want to put this is in the periphery of the white, where it comes up against the more the stronger magenta. There we go. So what are equivalent colors? Well, the breast cancer pink is not bad. It's a nice saturated bright magenta. Punk rock pink is another one. Runic glow is another one. That's a fluorescent. The one I grabbed is called Acid Pink. It's not a Reaper paint. It's a different company, but same idea. It's the first one I found. Hey, right on, Belle the cat. But the key is we don't stop with this step. We go back in again afterwards, and you add the white in again afterwards. Okay. So we'll go. Let's do the pink first, or the white on the magenta side first. So I put that little dot of white in the eyes, eyelids, and on the top of the cheek again, because we need the in the hierarchy of what makes things look like they're lit. The most important one is value. The second one is saturation. So we just brought in a little bit more magenta saturation with that fluorescent. We're keeping the values high by re-adding the white in the area of our light source. There we go. And we have to bring the white back on the green side as well. Eyes, around the eyes, teeth. And I think I want to put one or two sharp white highlights on that bracer. To show how shiny it is. Do that on both sides. And on that belt buckle. Dagger hilt. Pommel, gems. Those little blingy things get a bit more light. Now, remember what I said about bounce light right at the start? And we've got the shadows down at the bottom of the model there. And this light is the combination of our two light sources. So this area down at the bottom, which is fully black, still needs a little bit of bounce light in there. So we'll turn the model upside down. Don't be alarmed when you turn it upside down, it's going to look pretty gross. And we go back to our very first color of the day, which is sitting right here in our wet palette. This is the magic of the wet palette. And now we don't take this green and just paint it into the shadows. What happens is this diffuse light, when it bounces, it becomes less intense when it bounces up and hits into the shadows down on the bottom of the model. So what we want to do is we're not going to use the lighter color, we'll use that darker version of this gray and just lightly paint it in on the bottoms of shapes where the light would bounce up and light them up. There's going to be some areas on the model where the light will not hit at all because of the different angles. The light bouncing off the floor can't actually get in there. That area is called the ambient occlusion, and it just means the area where ambient and reflected light can't bounce. You might get some secondary reflections in there, but not much, not enough to, on a project like this, to paint them in. But that little bit of extra light painted in as a highlight within the shadow actually really helps to make our OSL look even brighter. Now, if we wanted to, and we feel like that is not light enough, we could make one very slightly lighter color, but it has to stay very, very dark. It has to be darker than this color on the base, and pick out a few little additional highlights inside those shapes. You want to focus closer to the bottom where the reflected light will be stronger. Oops, sorry, I'm just drifting a little bit there. And do a little bit of that on the back of the model too if we want. Now I'll just want to be clear that so the contrast on this model is working really, really well. Okay, but wow, Heather, holy mackerel, knocked it out of the park. And this is what it was just going to get at, right? The camera makes this look astoundingly good. Okay, but hey, there we go. Good stuff, Heather, really good. But if you could see this model in person, okay, you can see that I really haven't done much smooth blending. I have not got like super, super crisp highlighting and shadow in there. Okay, looks pretty good, but it's not a finished, refined model by any stretch. So just don't look on this result and kind of despair. It's a guide to get you going in the right direction. Okay. Heather's, on the other hand, is awesome. Let's take a look at Heather's. Damn. So good. Yep. Nicely done. Nicely done. Okay, so here's our finished model. Let's fix that. Okay. Hey, good screenshot there, Chris. Yeah. Well, hopefully that gives you some ways to think about object source lighting. Remember, always the first thing is plan it, right? This accidental OSL never works. Value, most important thing. The highest values in the model are the center of the light source. Has to be, or your eye won't recognize it that way. And then use color saturation to build up the volume of the light source and to show where the light source is hitting. And yeah, make lots of use of gray. Gray is your friend when you're trying to do object source lighting. Your brain will actually fill in colors into the grays. And that's one of the reasons why when you look at an OSL model, if the grays are done right, it looks brighter lit than it actually was. And so a little bit more of a complicated subject for today, but I appreciate everybody who painted along. You did a really great job. And second last one of this season. The next one, we're going to do Jana Frostwind. Where is she? There's Jana. And Jana is going to get the non-metallic metal treatment. Helmet, rim of the shield, sword, and we'll try to do some nice skin tones and nice hair on her too. Maybe even a wooden shield. We'll see. But the focus next time will be NMM. All right, and we'll call that it for today.